The rain fell hard on the metal roof of the research station, each drop sounding like tiny hammers against the steel. Dr. Sarah pulled her coat as she walked through the corridors of Outpost 7, a remote facility on the edge of human space. The coffee in her hands had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. Her mind was focused on the report she'd received that morning. "Another dragon sighting," she whispered to herself, shaking her head. The local miners had been talking about it for weeks. A massive creature, bound in chains, lying motionless in the deepest cave system on this forgotten planet. Most of the researchers dismissed it as folklore, the kind of stories that spread when people spent too long away from civilization. But Sarah was different, as she had learned to listen when locals spoke of strange creatures. Too many times, what others called myths turned out to be undiscovered species. And this planet, with its dense atmosphere and unusual mineral compositions, could easily hide life forms that human understanding. The comm system crackled to life. "Doctor to the briefing room, please. Doctor to the briefing room." Sarah sighed and made her way down the narrow hallway. The briefing room was small, barely large enough for the 6 researchers stationed on 7. Commander Tors, a gruff man in his 50s, sat at the head of the table. His weathered face showed the stress of managing a remote outpost where nothing ever went according to plan. "Sit down," Tors said without looking up from his tablet. "We have a situation." Sarah took her usual seat near the window, where she could see the purple-tinted landscape of 7 stretching into the distance. The planet's twin suns cast strange shadows across the rocky terrain, creating an alien beauty that never failed to captivate her. "The mining operation in Sector 7 has hit a snag," Tors continued. "They've encountered something unexpected in the deepest tunnels, something big." Dr. Martinez, the team's geologist, leaned forward. "Define big, Commander." Tors activated the holographic display in the center of the table. A 3-dimensional map of the cave system appeared, with red markers indicating the mining progress. At the very bottom of the deepest tunnel, a large chamber was highlighted in yellow. "The miners broke through into a natural cavern yesterday," Tors explained. "Initial scans show it's massive, but that's not the strange part." The hologram zoomed in on the chamber, revealing detailed sensor readings. Sarah's eyes widened as she studied the data. Heat signatures, electromagnetic anomalies, and something else that made her heart race. "Life signs," she whispered. Tors nodded grimly. "Big ones. The miners reported seeing something before they retreated. They described it as a dragon." Doctor, the team's physicist, laughed nervously. "Come on, Commander, dragons? These miners have been breathing too much processed air." "That's what I thought," Tors replied, "until I saw the video footage." The hologram switched to a grainy recording from a miner's helmet camera. The image was dark and shaky, illuminated only by powerful work lights. As the camera panned across the cavern floor, something massive came into view. Sarah gasped. Even through the poor quality of the recording, she could see it clearly. A creature unlike anything in the known biological databases. It was enormous, easily 30 meters long, with scales that seemed to shimmer in the artificial light. 4 powerful legs ended in claws that could tear through steel. Wings, folded against its back, suggested it was built for flight despite its current earthbound state. But what made Sarah's blood run cold were the chains. Massive metal restraints encircled the creature's neck, legs, and wings. The chains appeared to be made of some unknown alloy, glowing faintly with an inner light. They were clearly not human-made. The technology was far too advanced, the design too alien. "My God," Sarah breathed, "it's real and it's been imprisoned." The creature in the video appeared unconscious or dormant. Its great head rested on the stone floor, and its breathing was slow and labored. Even in its weakened state, the dragon radiated an aura of intelligence and ancient power that made Sarah's scientific mind race with possibilities. "The question is," Tors said, shutting off the recording, "what do we do about it?" Dr. Martinez spoke first. "We report it to Colonial Command. This is way above our pay grade." "That could take weeks," protested. "By the time they send a proper expedition, who knows what might happen." Sarah stood up suddenly, her chair scraping against the floor. "We have to help it." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to her and she felt heat rising in her cheeks. But she pressed on, driven by something deeper than scientific curiosity. "Look at those chains," she continued. Someone or something imprisoned this creature. It's been down there for who knows how long, possibly centuries, or even, we can't just leave it like that. Tors frowned. We don't know anything about this creature. It could be dangerous. Those chains might be there for a good reason. Or they might be there for a terrible reason, Sarah shot back. What if this dragon was imprisoned by the same force that wiped out the previous inhabitants of this planet? That gave everyone pause. The archaeological evidence was clear that Seven had once supported an advanced civilization. Cities lay in ruins across the planet's surface, their inhabitants long gone. No one knew what had happened to them, but the destruction had been swift and complete. We have protocols, Martinez said weakly. Protocols written by people who never imagined we'd find something like this, Sarah replied. She turned to Tors, her eyes pleading. Commander, give me 24 hours. Let me go down there and assess the situation. If the creature is hostile or dangerous, I'll recommend we wait for Colonial Command. Tors studied her for a long moment. Sarah held her breath, knowing that her entire career might depend on his decision. The commander was known for following regulations to the letter, but he was also pragmatic enough to recognize when situations called for flexible thinking. You don't go alone, he said finally. Take with you for technical support, and I want a full security detail. Sarah felt a surge of excitement mixed with terror. Thank you, Commander. Don't thank me yet, Tors warned. If this goes wrong, we're all going to have a lot of explaining to do. The next few hours passed in a blur of preparation. Sarah gathered her xenobiology equipment while assembled a portable laboratory. The security team, led by Sergeant, prepared their weapons and protective gear. None of them knew what to expect in the depths of Seven. As evening approached, Sarah stood at the entrance to the mine shaft, staring down into the darkness. The elevator that would take them to the dragon's chamber was an industrial freight lift, designed for hauling ore rather than transporting people on what might be the most important mission in human history. You sure about this, Doc? Sergeant asked, checking his rifle for the third time. Sarah nodded, though she wasn't sure of anything except that she had to try. That creature has been down there for too long. If we can help it, we should. The descent into the mine took nearly an hour. The elevator groaned and creaked as it carried them deeper into the planet's crust. The air grew thick and warm, filled with the smell of earth and metal. By the time they reached the bottom level, Sarah's ears were popping from the pressure change. The mining tunnels were narrow and claustrophobic, barely wide enough for the security team to move in single file. Emergency lighting cast eerie shadows on the rough-hewn walls, and the sound of dripping water echoed from somewhere in the darkness. Chambers just ahead, whispered, consulting his scanner. As they rounded the final corner, Sarah felt her breath catch in her throat. The tunnel opened into a vast natural cavern, its ceiling lost in shadow high above. But it wasn't the size of the chamber that stunned her. It was the dragon. In person, the creature was even more magnificent than the video had suggested. Its scales were deep emerald green with hints of gold, each one perfectly formed and overlapping like armor. The dragon's head was noble and intelligent, with features that spoke of wisdom and ancient knowledge. Even unconscious, it radiated a presence that made Sarah feel small and insignificant. The chains that bound it were even more disturbing up close. They pulsed with a sickly yellow light, and Sarah could feel the energy radiating from them even at a distance. Whatever civilization had created these restraints possessed technology far beyond human understanding. Readings are off the charts, whispered, studying his instruments. The energy signature from those chains is unlike anything I've seen. Sergeant and his team spread out around the chamber's perimeter, weapons ready. But Sarah barely noticed them. Her attention was focused entirely on the dragon. As she approached slowly, she noticed something that made her heart ache. The creature was malnourished. Its ribs showed through its scales, and its breathing was labored and weak. Whatever had imprisoned it here had left it to slowly waste away, alone in the darkness. How long do you think it's been here? Asked softly. Sarah knelt beside her equipment, setting up her scanners and biological sensors. Based on the mineral deposits around the chains, I'd guess at least several hundred years, maybe longer. And it's still alive. Dragons might have very different metabolisms than Earth creatures, Sarah replied, focused on her readings. Some species can enter extended hibernation states to survive harsh conditions. As her scanners came online, Sarah began to build a picture of the dragon's physiology. Its heart rate was slow but steady. Its brain activity showed signs of awareness even in its weakened state, and most importantly, its vital signs suggested it was in pain. The chains aren't just restraints, she realized with growing horror. They're causing constant agony. The energy they emit is designed to weaken and torment the dragon. Looked sick, that's torture. Centuries of torture, Sarah agreed, her anger building. What kind of beings would do this? She stood up and walked closer to the dragon's massive head. This close, she could see the intelligence in its partially open eyes. The dragon was aware of their presence, though it seemed too weak to react. "Hello," Sarah whispered, feeling foolish but compelled to try. "We're here to help." The dragon's eye focused on her, and for a moment, Sarah felt a connection, that scientific explanation. There was intelligence there and pain and something that might have been hope. That's when Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She had brought emergency rations in her pack, including a thermos of hot soup that the station's cook had prepared for the mission. It wasn't much, but it was warm and nutritious, designed to sustain humans in harsh conditions. "Doc, what are you doing?" Sergeant called out nervously as Sarah approached the dragon's head with the thermos. "It's starving," Sarah replied simply. "When was the last time it had anything to eat or drink?" "We don't know if human food is safe for it," protested. Sarah ignored him. She could see the dragon watching her with growing interest as the smell of the soup reached its nostrils. Its reaction confirmed her suspicion. The creature was desperately hungry. Carefully, she poured some of the warm soup into a metal bowl from her kit. The dragon's eyes followed her every movement, and when she placed the bowl near its massive snout, it didn't hesitate. The dragon's tongue, surprisingly delicate despite its size, lapped at the soup gratefully. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she watched the magnificent creature's obvious relief at finally receiving sustenance. "There you go," she whispered, pouring more soup into the bowl. "It's not much, but it's something." The dragon finished the soup quickly and looked at her with what could only be described as gratitude. Sarah found herself reaching out to touch the smooth scales near its nose, a gesture that would have terrified her under normal circumstances. "We're going to figure out how to get you out of here," she promised softly. "I don't know how yet, but we will." As if responding to her words, the dragon made a low rumbling sound deep in its chest. It wasn't threatening, more like a cat's purr if cats were the size of buildings. The sound resonated through the chamber, and Sarah felt it in her bones. "Doc, we need to go," Sergeant called out. "The commander wants us back before nightfall." Sarah nodded reluctantly. She refilled the bowl with the remaining soup and placed it where the dragon could reach it. "We'll be back," she told the creature. "I promise." As they made their way back through the tunnels, Sarah's mind was already working on the problem of the chains. The energy signature was complex, but not incomprehensible. With enough time and resources, they might be able to find a way to disrupt the restraints. But time was something they might not have. Once Colonial Command learned about the dragon, they would send military specialists and scientists who might view the creature as a threat rather than a victim. The bureaucracy could take months to make decisions, and Sarah doubted the dragon could survive much longer in its current condition. When they finally reached the surface, night had fallen over 7. The planet's twin moons cast silver light across the landscape, and Sarah paused to look up at the stars. Somewhere out there, an advanced civilization had once thrived on this world. They had built cities and unlocked technologies beyond human imagination. But they had also committed an act of unimaginable cruelty, chaining a sentient being in darkness for centuries. The contradiction troubled Sarah deeply. How could beings capable of such advanced science also be capable of such evil? Commander Torres appeared beside her. "Report." Sarah turned to face him, her expression serious. "The dragon is real, sir, and it's dying. Those chains are slowly killing it through some form of energy torture. If we don't act soon, we're going to lose the greatest discovery in human history." Torres studied her face in the moonlight. "What do you recommend?" "Give me time to study the chain technology," Sarah said, "and authorize regular supply runs to keep the dragon fed. It's been starving down there, but it responded well to human food." "You fed it." Sarah lifted her chin defiantly. "It was the right thing to do." Torres was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he nodded. You have 3 days. After that, I have to contact Colonial Command. Make them count. As Sarah watched the commander walk back toward the station, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. 3 days to solve a puzzle that had stumped an advanced alien civilization. 3 days to save a creature that represented everything humanity aspired to understand about the universe. 3 days to prove that sometimes, a simple act of kindness could change everything. Back in her quarters, Sarah spread out the data from their expedition across her desk. Energy readings, biological scans, and detailed photographs of the chains filled her computer screen. Somewhere in this information was the key to freeing the dragon. But as she worked late into the night, one thought kept returning to her mind. The look in the dragon's eyes when she had offered it soup. There had been intelligence there and pain, but also something else. Recognition. As if the dragon had been waiting for someone exactly like her to find it. Someone who would see beyond the fearsome appearance to the suffering creature beneath. Someone who would offer kindness without expecting anything in return. Sarah fell asleep at her desk, her dreams filled with emerald scales and ancient chains, and the feeling that her life had just taken a turn toward something extraordinary. Sarah's eyes snapped open to the sound of her alarm blaring. She had fallen asleep at her desk again, her face pressed against the scattered research papers. The data from yesterday's expedition stared back at her, no closer to revealing its secrets than when she'd started. 2 days left. She rubbed her stiff neck and glanced at the chronometer on her wall. 600 hours. She'd been working for 18 hours straight, surviving on coffee and determination. But the breakthrough she desperately needed remained just out of reach. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, not looking up from her screens. Doctor entered, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee and a plate of breakfast rations. "You missed dinner last night, and breakfast this morning." Sarah accepted the coffee gratefully. "Thank you. Did you finish analyzing the energy patterns from the chains?" Sat down across from her, his expression troubled. "That's what I wanted to talk to you about. Sarah, those chains aren't just advanced technology. They're beyond advanced. The energy matrix is self-sustaining, drawing power from dimensional fluctuations that shouldn't even be possible with our current understanding of physics." Sarah's heart sank. "So they can't be broken." "I didn't say that," replied, pulling out his own data pad. "But it would require something equally impossible. The chains respond to specific harmonic frequencies, but they're constantly shifting. It's like trying to unlock a door where the lock changes every few seconds." Sarah stared at the readings, her mind racing. There had to be a way. The civilization that built these chains was gone, which meant they weren't invincible. Something had defeated them, or they had destroyed themselves. "What about the dragon itself?" she asked. "Have you considered that it might be the key?" Frowned. "What do you mean?" "Think about it," Sarah said, standing up and packing around her small quarters. "These chains were specifically designed for this dragon. Not just any dragon, but this one specifically. The energy patterns are too precise, too tailored. That means there was something special about this particular creature that made it worth such an elaborate prison." "You think the dragon has some kind of power?" Sarah nodded excitedly. "I think this dragon was a threat to whoever built these chains, not just physically, but in some other way. Maybe it has abilities they feared." Looked skeptical. "Even if that's true, how does it help us? The dragon is barely conscious. It's been weakened by centuries of imprisonment." Sarah's chimed with an incoming message from Commander Torres. Her stomach clenched as she read it. "Colonial Command has been," she told, her voice hollow. "A research vessel is en route, ETA 36 hours. Whistled low. "That's fast." "Too fast," Sarah agreed. "They must have been monitoring our communications. Once the military gets here, they'll classify everything. The dragon will become a specimen, not a being worthy of rescue." Sarah made a decision that would have seemed impossible just days ago. "I'm going back down there." "Sarah, the commander ordered us to stay topside while he evaluates the situation." "The commander can court-martial me later," Sarah replied, grabbing her equipment pack. "But I'm not abandoning that dragon, not when we're so close to a breakthrough." Sighed, but he began gathering his own gear. "I'm coming with you." "You don't have to do this." "Yes, I do," said firmly. "You're right about the dragon. I saw the intelligence in its eyes yesterday. If there's a chance we can free it before the military arrives, we have to try. They made their way to the mine shaft, avoiding the main corridors where other staff might see them. The freight elevator groaned as it carried them down into the depths once again, but this time Sarah felt a sense of urgency that made her hands shake. The dragon was exactly as they had left it, but Sarah noticed immediately that the bowl she had left was empty. The creature's eyes tracked her movements as she approached, and she could swear she saw recognition there. "Hello again," she whispered, setting down her pack. "I brought more food." This time she had come prepared. The station's kitchen had provided several containers of high-energy soup, along with protein bars and vitamin supplements. As Sarah fed the dragon, she noticed its color seemed slightly brighter, its breathing a little stronger. "The food is helping," she observed too, who was setting up more sophisticated scanning equipment. "More than helping," replied, studying his readings. "The dragon's metabolism is responding faster than should be possible. It's like its body was designed to rapidly recover from starvation." Sarah watched the dragon eat with growing fascination. There was something almost ritual about the way it consumed the food, pausing occasionally to look at her with those ancient, intelligent eyes. It wasn't just grateful for the sustenance. It was trying to communicate something. Sarah said slowly, "What if the dragon is trying to tell us something?" "What do you mean?" Sarah approached the dragon's massive head, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. The creature watched her with interest but no fear, which surprised her. Most wild animals would be terrified of unknown creatures, especially ones so much smaller than themselves. "Yesterday, when I first fed it, I made a promise," Sarah explained. "I said we would find a way to free it, and it responded with that purring sound. What if that wasn't just contentment? What if it was acknowledgement?" Looked up from his instruments. "You think it understood you?" "I think it understood more than just my words," Sarah replied. She reached out cautiously and placed her hand on the dragon's snout. The scales were warm and smooth, and she could feel the creature's pulse through her fingertips. The dragon's eyes closed at her touch, and that deep purring sound rumbled through the chamber again. But this time, Sarah felt something else. A tingling sensation in her mind, like the feeling of remembering something important that had been forgotten. Images flashed through her consciousness. Not her memories, but something else entirely. She saw the dragon flying through alien skis, its wings carrying it over cities of impossible beauty. She saw beings of light and energy who spoke without words and shaped matter with pure thought. And she saw the war. The images came faster now, overwhelming her senses. The dragon fighting alongside the beings of light against something dark and hungry. Ships of living metal descending from the stars. Cities burning as shadow consumed everything in its path. The dragon fell in battle, wounded but not defeated. The beings of light, dying themselves, used their last strength to bind the dragon in chains of energy. Not as punishment, but as protection. They hid it away in the deep places of the world, waiting for a time when the darkness had passed and it would be safe to emerge. But the darkness had not passed. It had consumed the beings of light and moved on to other worlds, leaving the dragon trapped and forgotten. For centuries, it had waited in the darkness, slowly weakening, hope fading with each passing year. Until yesterday, when a small human woman had offered it soup and kindness. Sarah gasped and stumbled backward, the connection broken. Caught her arm, his face full of concern. "Sarah, what happened? You went completely rigid for almost a minute." Sarah's mind reeled as she tried to process what she had experienced. "It showed me," she whispered. "The dragon showed me what happened, why it's here." "That's impossible." "Is it?" Sarah turned to face, her eyes bright with excitement and terror. "We know telepathy exists. Several species we've encountered have limited psychic abilities. Why not dragons?" "Because dragons aren't real," protested, then stopped himself as he looked at the massive creature before them. "I mean, they weren't supposed to be real." Sarah turned back to the dragon, which was watching her with what she now recognized as hope. "The chains aren't just keeping it imprisoned," she realized. "They're preventing it from using its psychic abilities. That's why the civilization that built them was so afraid." "Afraid of what?" Sarah walked over to the nearest chain, studying its pulsing energy patterns with new understanding. A telepathic dragon that could communicate with other species, share knowledge, unite different civilizations against a common threat. The beings who built these chains weren't trying to protect the universe from the dragon. They were part of whatever the dragon was fighting against. Stared at her in disbelief. You're saying this dragon is some kind of galactic freedom fighter? I'm saying this dragon is a survivor of a war we know nothing about, Sarah replied. And it's been waiting for someone who could see past its fearsome appearance to the intelligence underneath. She pulled out her energy scanner and began taking detailed readings of the chains. The patterns had described as impossible suddenly made sense when viewed through the lens of psychic energy rather than pure technology. The harmonic frequencies, she murmured, working furiously. They're not random. They're designed to disrupt thought patterns, prevent the dragon from focusing its mental abilities. So if we could disrupt the harmonics, the dragon might be able to break free on its own, Sarah finished. But how do we disrupt something this sophisticated? The answer came from the dragon itself. Sarah felt a gentle touch against her mind, not invasive like before, but offering rather than taking. She opened herself to the contact and immediately understood. The dragon couldn't break the chains from within. They were specifically designed to prevent that. But they had a weakness. They were powered by a central node buried deep in the chamber's floor, and that node could be overloaded if hit with the right frequency at precisely the right moment. The dragon had been trying to reach that frequency for centuries, but its weakened state made it impossible. However, human technology might be able to provide the boost it needed. Sarah said urgently, I need you to recalibrate the mining equipment upstairs. Set the sonic borers to frequency 7.452 and focus them on coordinates. She rattled off a string of numbers that had appeared in her mind. Looked confused. That frequency will cause massive resonance in the cave system. The whole mountain could collapse. Not if we time it right, Sarah replied, her confidence growing as more information flowed from the dragon. The dragon will use its abilities to contain the resonance and redirect it into the chain's power source. Sarah, this is insane. We're talking about trusting our lives to a creature we've known for 2 days. Sarah looked into the dragon's eyes and saw centuries of wisdom, pain, and hope. Sometimes trust is all we have. Hesitated for another moment, then pulled out his. I'll need an hour to make the modifications. We have 50 minutes, Sarah replied, checking her chronometer. Commander Torres will notice we're gone soon and once Colonial Command arrives. Nodded and headed for the surface, leaving Sarah alone with the dragon. She sat down beside its massive head, close enough to feel the warmth radiating from its scales. Are you sure this will work? She asked softly. The dragon's response came as a feeling rather than words. Confidence mixed with uncertainty, hope tempered by the knowledge that failure meant death for both of them. But underneath it all was something else, gratitude that someone had finally listened, finally understood. Sarah spent the next hour feeding the dragon every bit of food she had brought, trying to strengthen it for what was to come. She also found herself talking to it, sharing stories of humanity's journey to the stars, their struggles and triumphs, their endless curiosity about the universe. The dragon listened with rapt attention, occasionally sharing its own memories of worlds long lost and civilizations that had reached heights humanity could barely imagine. Through their growing connection, Sarah began to understand that the dragon wasn't just intelligent. It was ancient beyond measure, a living repository of galactic history. His voice crackled through her. Modifications complete. Are you ready down there? Sarah stood up and walked to the center of the chamber, positioning herself according to the dragon's guidance. Ready. Sarah's voice was tense with worry. If this doesn't work. It will work, Sarah replied with more confidence than she felt. It has to. The first pulse came as a low rumble that seemed to emanate from the very bones of the planet. Sarah felt it in her chest, her teeth, her bones. The chains around the dragon began to flicker and pulse in response, their harmonic patterns disrupted for the first time in centuries. The dragon's eyes blazed with emerald fire as it began to focus its mental abilities. Sarah could feel its concentration like a physical force pressing against her consciousness. The air in the chamber grew thick with energy, crackling with potential. The second pulse was stronger, causing loose rocks to fall from the ceiling. The chains flickered more rapidly now, their yellow glow fluctuating wildly. Sarah saw sweat beading on the dragon's massive forehead as it strained against bonds that had held it for so long. Third pulse incoming. His voice was barely audible over the growing rumble. Sarah closed her eyes and opened her mind completely to the dragon, offering her own mental energy to supplement its weakened state. The connection was overwhelming. She felt the dragon's pain, its hope, its desperate need for freedom after centuries of captivity. The third pulse shattered the harmonic matrix. With a sound like breaking glass amplified 1,000-fold, the chains exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Energy cascaded through the chamber as centuries of stored power discharged all at once. Sarah was thrown to the ground by the force of the explosion, her ears ringing and her vision blurred. When the light faded and the rumbling stopped, Sarah slowly pushed herself to her feet. The chamber was filled with dust and debris, but the oppressive feeling of constrained energy was gone. And there, rising to its full magnificent height for the first time in centuries, was the dragon. Free! It stretched its wings, each one larger than the research station above, and let out a roar that shook the mountain to its foundations. But when it looked down at Sarah, its eyes were gentle, filled with a gratitude that transcended species and language. "We did it," Sarah whispered, hardly able to believe what she was seeing. The dragon lowered its great head until it was level with Sarah's, and she felt a touch against her mind. Not intrusive this time, but like the mental equivalent of an embrace. Images flowed between them, not memories this time, but possibilities. She saw herself standing before the leaders of humanity, the dragon beside her as an ambassador from the ancient civilizations of the galaxy. She saw human ships exploring distant worlds under the dragon's guidance, learning from its vast knowledge of the universe. She saw a future where humanity was no longer alone among the stars, but part of a greater community of intelligent beings. But first, they had to escape this planet before colonial command arrived. "Can you fly?" Sarah asked. The dragon's answer came as a feeling of eagerness mixed with uncertainty. It had been so long since it had used its wings, and its body was still recovering from centuries of imprisonment. Sarah's crackled to life. "Sarah, the military vessel just dropped out of hyperspace. They'll be here in 30 minutes. "We're coming up," Sarah replied, then looked at the dragon. "Can you make yourself smaller? The mine shaft isn't big enough for your full size." To her amazement, the dragon began to shimmer and contract, its form becoming more compact while retaining its essential shape. When the transformation was complete, it stood only 3 meters tall, still impressive, but small enough to fit through the tunnels. "Shape-shifting too," Sarah murmured. "Just how many abilities do you have?" The dragon's response was equivalent to a modest shrug, though Sarah sensed there were powers it hadn't even begun to show her yet. They made their way through the tunnels together, the dragon moving with surprising grace despite its time in captivity. When they reached the freight elevator, Sarah held her breath as the ancient machinery groaned under their combined weight. The elevator seemed to take forever, but finally they emerged into the main level of the mine. Sarah could hear the distant roar of atmospheric engines as the colonial command ship approached the landing pad. "This way," she guided the dragon toward a side exit that led to the vehicle bay. Her plan was simple: get to one of the exploration vehicles and drive to a safe distance before the dragon returned to full size and took flight. But as they rounded the corner into the vehicle bay, they found Commander Tors waiting for them, along with Sergeant and his security team. All weapons were trained on the dragon, who stopped moving the moment it saw them. "Dr. Tors said calmly, 'Please step away from the creature.'" Sarah moved protectively in front of the dragon, her heart pounding. "Commander, you don't understand. It's not dangerous. It's intelligent. It's been imprisoned here for centuries by—" "I understand more than you think," Tors interrupted. "I've been monitoring your communications with Doctor. Telepathic contact with an unknown alien species is a violation of first contact protocols." "The protocols are wrong," Sarah shot back. "This dragon isn't some primitive creature. It's a survivor of an advanced civilization. It has knowledge that could benefit all of humanity." Tor's expression softened slightly. "Maybe so, but that's not my decision to make. Colonial Command will determine how to proceed." "They'll dissect it," Sarah said desperately. "Or lock it up in some laboratory. Is that what you want? To become part of the same kind of cruelty that kept this creature chained for centuries?" For a moment, uncertainty flickered in Tor's eyes. Then the sound of landing thrusters echoed through the facility, and his resolve hardened. "I'm sorry, but I have my orders." That's when the dragon acted. Sarah felt a gentle touch against her mind, and suddenly she understood what was about to happen. She dropped to the ground just as the dragon's mental abilities reached out to the security team. But instead of attacking their minds, the dragon simply shared its memories with them. In the space of a heartbeat, Tors and the other soldiers experienced centuries of imprisonment, the pain of the chains, and the war that had led to the dragon's captivity. They saw the truth, that the dragon was not a monster to be feared, but a hero who had sacrificed everything to protect innocent worlds from an ancient evil. They felt its gratitude toward Sarah, its hope for a future where humanity and the dragon's people could stand together against the darkness that still lurked among the stars. When the contact ended, several of the soldiers had tears in their eyes. Sergeant slowly lowered his weapon, his face pale with shock. "My God," Tors whispered, "what have we done?" The dragon stood quietly, making no aggressive moves despite being surrounded. Sarah realized it was giving them time to process what they had learned, to make their own choice about what to do next. The sound of marching boots in the corridor announced the arrival of colonial command troops. Tors looked from the dragon to Sarah, then made a decision that would change his life forever. "Loading Bay 3, he said quietly. "There's an exploration rover ready for departure. The trail to the eastern mountains is rough, but it'll get you far enough away." Sarah stared at him in amazement. "Commander." "Go," Tors said firmly. "Before I change my mind. And Doctor, next time you decide to break a few thousand regulations, maybe give me more warning." Sarah felt a surge of gratitude that threatened to overwhelm her. "Thank you." She turned to the dragon, which had already begun moving toward the designated loading bay. As they hurried through the corridors, Sarah could hear Tors directing his security team to delay the colonial command forces as long as possible. The rover was a sturdy all-terrain vehicle designed for long-range exploration. It was also, Sarah noted with relief, large enough to accommodate a shape-shifted dragon. As they climbed aboard, she could hear Tors' voice over the facility's intercom system. "Attention Colonial Command personnel. We have experienced a minor containment breach in the lower levels. Please remain in the landing bay while we assess the situation." Sarah started the rover's engines and gunned it toward the exit. Behind them, the research facility grew smaller as they raced across the rocky terrain of 7. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in brilliant shades of purple and gold. As they reached the foothills of the eastern mountains, Sarah brought the rover to a stop and looked at her companion. The dragon had remained in its smaller form throughout their escape, but now it began to expand back to its natural size. Standing beside the rover, wings spread wide against the alien sunset, the dragon was the most beautiful thing Sarah had ever seen. It looked down at her with eyes that held the wisdom of ages and the promise of wonders yet to come. "What happens now?" Sarah asked. The dragon's answer came as a series of images and feelings. It would return to the stars, seeking others of its kind who had survived the ancient war. But it would not forget the small human who had shown it kindness when it needed it most. And someday, when humanity was ready, it would return to repay that kindness. The dragon leaned down and gently touched Sarah's forehead with its snout. The contact was brief but profound, leaving her with a sense of connection that she knew would last the rest of her life. Then, with a powerful leap that seemed to defy gravity, the dragon launched itself into the darkening sky. Its wings caught the wind, and within moments it was soaring among the stars, free at last. Sarah stood alone beside the rover, watching until the dragon disappeared into the vastness of space. Tomorrow, she would have to face the consequences of her actions. There would be interrogations, disciplinary hearings, and possibly criminal charges. But tonight, under the alien stars of 7, Sarah felt like the luckiest person in the universe. She had helped free a legend, made contact with an ancient intelligence, and possibly changed the course of human history. All because she had offered soup to a creature in need. As she drove back toward the research station, Sarah's crackled with an encrypted message from an unknown source. The voice that emerged was unlike anything she had ever heard, harmonic, layered with meaning beyond words. "Sarah of Earth," the voice said, "your kindness has been noted by those who watch the stars. The dragon you freed was our brother, lost to us for so many centuries. Your people show promise. We will be watching with interest as humanity takes its next steps among the stars." The message ended, leaving Sarah staring at in wonder. Somewhere out there, an ancient civilization had taken notice of humanity, not because of their weapons or their technology, but because one woman had chosen compassion over fear. Sarah smiled as the research station came into view. Whatever happened next, she knew humanity's journey among the stars had just become far more interesting. And in the depths of space, a dragon flew free, carrying with it the memory of kindness and the promise of friendship between species separated by eons, but united by something far more powerful than time or distance. The gift of understanding. 6 months had passed since the dragon's escape from Seven, but for Sarah, it felt like a lifetime. The hearing rooms of Colonial Command headquarters on Earth were sterile and cold, nothing like the warmth she remembered from her brief connection with the ancient creature. Today marked the final session of what the media had dubbed the Dragon Incident Inquiry. Sarah sat at the defendant's table, her hands folded calmly in her lap. Across from her, Admiral, head of Colonial Command's Xenobiology Division, shuffled through thick files of testimony and evidence. The past 6 months had been a whirlwind of depositions, psychological evaluations, and classified briefings that Sarah wasn't allowed to attend. "Doctor," Admiral began, his voice carrying the weight of military authority. "After extensive review of the events on Seven, this board has reached some troubling conclusions." Sarah remained silent, though her heart rate increased. She had expected this moment for months, but it still felt surreal to be facing court-martial proceedings for an act she considered the greatest achievement of her career. "Your unauthorized contact with an unknown alien species violated 17 separate protocols," continued. "Your decision to feed the creature without proper biological clearance put the entire expedition at risk. Your collaboration with Doctor to modify mining equipment without authorization caused significant damage to colonial property." Admiral paused, studying Sarah's face. "However, we have also reviewed the testimony of Commander Torres, Sergeant, and the other personnel present during the incident. Their accounts of the telepathic contact with the creature have been illuminating." Sarah felt a flutter of hope. During the hearings, Torres and his team had about their brief mental connection with the dragon, describing in detail the memories and emotions they had experienced. It had been the most controversial part of the entire inquiry. "Doctor," said, his tone shifting slightly, "in your own words, please describe what you believe you accomplished on Seven." Sarah took a deep breath. This was her moment to make her case, possibly for the last time. "Admiral, I believe I made first contact with a representative of an ancient spacefaring civilization. The dragon wasn't just an animal. It was a sentient being with centuries of knowledge about galactic history, technology, and threats that humanity has never encountered." "And your evidence for this claim?" "The telepathic contact, sir. The shared memories, the technological knowledge it provided about the chains, and most importantly, the message we received after its departure." Sarah pulled out a data pad containing the encrypted transmission. "This was sent to our facility using communication protocols that are decades ahead of our current technology." Nodded slowly. "We've had our best cryptographers and analyzed that message. The complexity of the harmonic patterns suggests an intelligence far beyond what we've encountered in any other species." "Then you understand why freeing the dragon was the right choice," Sarah said earnestly. "It wasn't just about helping one creature. It was about proving to an advanced civilization that humanity is capable of compassion, even when faced with something beyond our understanding." The Admiral leaned back in his chair, exchanging glances with the other board members. "Doctor, what I'm about to tell you is classified at the highest levels. 3 weeks ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected an anomalous object approaching the outer rim of human space." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. "What kind of object?" "A ship," replied. "Unlike anything in our databases, it's massive, roughly the size of a small moon, and it's broadcasting that same harmonic signature as the message you received. The ship has been holding position at the edge of the Sol system, apparently waiting for something." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They came back. "Indeed, and yesterday we received another transmission, this one directed specifically at Earth." Activated a holographic display that filled the hearing room with alien symbols that seemed to shift and flow like living things. "The message was brief," continued. It requested permission to enter Earth's solar system for the purpose of establishing formal diplomatic contact, and Doctor, it specifically asked for you by name. Sarah stared at the display in amazement. They want to meet with me. According to our translation experts, the message references the small being who shows kindness to the Ancient One. Given the context, we believe that refers to you. Admiral stood up, his formal demeanor softening slightly. Doctor, in light of these developments, this board has decided to drop all charges against you. Instead, we're offering you a choice. Sarah looked up at him, hardly daring to hope. Option 1, continued, you return to your previous position as with Colonial Command. Your record will show a reprimand for protocol violations, but nothing more. You'll be assigned to a safe, routine research position where you can continue your career without further incident. And option 2, Sarah asked, though she suspected she already knew. Smiled for the first time during the hearing. Option 2 is that you accept promotion to senior diplomatic and serve as humanity's first ambassador to this ancient civilization. It would mean working directly with alien beings whose capabilities we don't fully understand, traveling to unknown regions of space, and essentially writing the handbook for diplomacy as you go. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes. You're serious? Dead serious, replied. The dragon you freed appears to have been some kind of test, Doctor, a way for this civilization to evaluate humanity's character. Your actions may have determined whether our species is welcomed into the galactic community or left to develop in isolation for another few thousand years. The weight of responsibility was staggering, but Sarah didn't hesitate. I accept option 2, sir. Nodded approvingly. I hoped you would. You'll have 2 weeks to prepare. The alien ship is scheduled to arrive at Earth orbit in 14 days, and they've specifically requested that you be part of the welcoming committee. As the hearing adjourned, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror unlike anything she had ever experienced. She was about to become humanity's first interstellar diplomat, representing her entire species to beings whose technology and wisdom spanned. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of intensive briefings, diplomatic training, and medical examinations. Sarah learned everything humanity knew about advanced alien civilizations, studied theoretical frameworks for communication, and underwent genetic testing to ensure she could survive prolonged contact with unknown alien environments. But nothing could have prepared her for the moment when the alien ship finally entered Earth's solar system. Sarah stood on the observation deck of the diplomatic station orbiting Earth, watching as the massive vessel approached. The ship was beautiful in an otherworldly way, its hull seeming to flow and shift like liquid metal. Energy patterns danced across its surface in colors that hurt to look at directly. Visual contact confirmed, announced Captain, commander of the diplomatic station. The alien vessel is holding position at 1,000 kilometers and requesting permission to dock. Permission granted, Sarah replied, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. She wore the dark blue uniform of the diplomatic corps with insignia indicating her new rank as senior ambassador. The title still felt surreal. As the alien ship approached the docking bay, Sarah noticed that it wasn't just one vessel but a collection of smaller ships that moved in perfect harmony, like a school of fish swimming through space. When they finally connected with the station, the docking procedure was so smooth it seemed almost choreographed. Sarah made her way to the main airlock, accompanied by a small team of linguists and diplomatic personnel. Her hands trembled slightly as she checked her translation device one final time. The airlock cycled, and Sarah held her breath as the door slid open. What emerged was not what she had expected. The first being through the airlock was humanoid in basic shape, but clearly alien. It stood nearly 3 meters tall, with skin that seemed to be made of crystalline structures that caught and refracted the station's lighting. Its eyes were large and multifaceted, like those of an insect, but with an unmistakable intelligence behind them. But it wasn't the alien's appearance that shocked Sarah. It was the familiar presence she felt touching the edges of her mind. The dragon followed the crystalline being through the airlock, though it had taken a form Sarah had never seen before. Instead of its massive, traditional dragon shape, it appeared almost like a large cat with scales instead of fur and wings folded against its back. Its eyes, however, were unmistakably the same ones that had looked at her with gratitude in the depths of 7. Sarah of Earth, the crystalline being spoke, its voice a harmonious blend of tones that seemed to resonate in her bones. "I am Prime, speaker for the Eternal Council. We come bearing greetings from the ancient civilizations of the galaxy." Sarah stepped forward, drawing on her diplomatic training. "Welcome to the Sol system, Prime. I'm honored to serve as humanity's representative in this historic meeting." Prime's multifaceted eyes studied her with interest. "The honor is ours, Ambassador, has spoken of you with great fondness." Sarah looked at the dragon and felt the same warm mental touch she remembered from their first encounter. "Hello again, old friend," she said softly. Its response came as a feeling of joy and contentment. The dragon had returned to its people and found others who had survived the ancient war, but it had never forgotten the human who had shown it kindness in its darkest hour. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in more comfortable surroundings," Sarah suggested, gesturing toward the station's main conference room. The next few hours were the most extraordinary of Sarah's life. Through Prime's translation and telepathic communication, she learned the true scope of galactic civilization. The Eternal Council was an alliance of dozens of species that had survived the Great War had shown her in its memories. For millions of years, they had worked to rebuild what had been lost and protect younger civilizations from the darkness that still lurked in the space between galaxies. "Your species shows remarkable promise," Prime explained, its crystalline features shifting in what Sarah had learned to recognize as expressions of approval. "Most young civilizations focus on expansion and conquest when they reach the stars. Humans have shown capacity for growth, curiosity, and most importantly, compassion." "The test with," Sarah realized, "you were evaluating us." "Not evaluating," Prime corrected gently. "Was truly imprisoned by the servants of the shadow, the enemy we have fought for so long. But his rescue became an opportunity to see how humanity would respond to a being in need. Your choice to help despite the risks showed us that your species possesses the qualities necessary for membership in the greater galactic community." Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with overwhelming responsibility. "What does that mean exactly, membership?" "Knowledge," Prime replied simply. "Technology to help you explore the galaxy safely. Wisdom gathered over millions of years, protection against threats you have not yet imagined, and most importantly, friendship among the stars." Moved closer to Sarah, and she felt another gentle touch against her mind. This time, the dragon shared visions of the future, human ships exploring distant galaxies under the guidance of ancient civilizations, Earth becoming a hub of interstellar trade and diplomacy, and humanity taking its place as protectors of younger species just beginning their own journeys to the stars. "There is much work to be done," Prime continued. "The shadow we fought long ago has not been defeated, merely pushed back to the dark spaces between galaxies. It will return eventually, and when it does, we will need all the allies we can find." Sarah nodded slowly, understanding the magnitude of what was being offered and what would be expected in return. "How do we begin?" "With trust," Prime replied, "and with the understanding that joining the galactic community means accepting responsibilities as well as benefits. You will help protect species less advanced than your own. You will share knowledge freely with those who need it, and you will stand with us when the darkness returns." Over the following days, Sarah worked tirelessly to establish the framework for humanity's integration into galactic civilization. The process was complex, involving not just political agreements but fundamental changes in how humans viewed their place in the universe. The revelation that Earth was no longer alone sent shockwaves around the world. Some humans were terrified by the prospect of advanced alien civilizations, while others were excited by the possibilities. Sarah found herself at the center of it all, working with world leaders to navigate humanity's entry into a larger community. But the most meaningful moments came during her private conversations with. The dragon had appointed itself as humanity's guide and protector, sharing knowledge that would help the young species avoid the mistakes that had nearly destroyed so many others. Through their telepathic connection, Sarah learned about technologies that could heal diseases, environmental restoration techniques that could repair damaged worlds, and defensive systems that could protect Earth from threats both natural and artificial. "Why," Sarah asked during one of their sessions, "why are you and the Council doing this for us?" His answer came as a complex mixture of emotions and concepts that took Sarah several minutes to fully understand. The dragon's people had once been young and eager, exploring the galaxy with the same curiosity that drove humanity. They had been helped by older civilizations, just as they were now helping humans. But more than that, there was a debt to be paid. Sarah's act of kindness had freed not just, but had given hope to all the survivors of the ancient war. Her willingness to help a strange creature had proven that compassion could transcend species barriers. The universe can be dark and cruel, thoughts whispered in Sarah's mind. But acts of kindness create light that drives back the shadows. You lit such a light, small one. Now we help you share that light with all the galaxy. 3 months after first contact, Sarah stood once again on the observation deck of the diplomatic station. But this time, she wasn't watching alien ships approach. She was watching human vessels prepare to depart for distant stars. The first wave of human explorers was about to begin their journey to the Eternal Council's home worlds, where they would learn technologies and philosophies that would transform human civilization. Earth itself was already changing, as alien knowledge helped solve problems that had plagued humanity for generations. But perhaps the most significant change was in humanity's perspective. No longer alone in the universe, humans began to see themselves as part of something larger, caretakers and protectors of the galaxy, rather than just another species struggling for survival. Sarah felt's presence as the dragon joined her at the observation window. In the months since their reunion, their telepathic bond had grown stronger, allowing them to communicate with an intimacy that transcended words. "Do you ever regret it?" Sarah asked aloud, knowing the dragon would understand she was referring to those first moments in the cave when she had offered soup to a stranger. His response came as a wave of contentment and satisfaction. The dragon had no regrets, only gratitude for the chain of events that had led to this moment. A simple act of kindness had saved not just one imprisoned creature, but had opened the door to a future neither of them could have imagined. "The Council has asked me to serve as permanent liaison between humanity and the galactic community," Sarah said. "It means I'll be traveling to distant worlds, helping establish diplomatic relations with species we've never encountered. Will you come with me?" His answer was immediate and joyful. Of course it would accompany its friend. There were wonders among the stars that Sarah had yet to see, and the dragon was eager to share them with the human who had shown it that kindness was the most powerful force in the universe. As the human ships began their journey into the unknown, Sarah reflected on the events that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, she had been a simple studying rock samples on a remote planet. Now she was humanity's first interstellar ambassador, embarking on adventures that would define the future of her species. All because she had chosen to feed soup to a hungry dragon. Years passed, and the partnership between humanity and the Eternal Council grew stronger. Human cities spread across dozens of worlds, always with respect for the indigenous life forms and guided by the principles and the other ancient beings had taught them. Sarah, now bearing the title of Grand Ambassador, had become a legend in her own right. Stories spread throughout human space of the woman who had befriended a dragon and opened the stars to humanity. But she never forgot the lesson that had started it all. On every world she visited, at every diplomatic function she attended, Sarah made it a point to seek out those who were hungry, lost, or forgotten. She had learned that true strength came not from advanced technology or military might, but from the simple willingness to help those in need. And beside her always was the ancient dragon whose freedom had cost nothing more than a bowl of soup and an open heart. Together, they worked to ensure that humanity would never lose sight of the compassion that had earned them their place among the stars. The darkness that the Eternal Council had warned about still lurked in the spaces between galaxies, and someday it would return. But when it did, it would find not just scattered civilizations fighting alone, but a united galaxy bound together by shared values and mutual support. A galaxy where a young woman's act of kindness had become the foundation for an alliance that would endure for. In the end, Sarah often reflected, the most profound changes in the universe rarely came from grand gestures or mighty deeds. More often, they began with something as simple as offering food to a stranger, listening to those who had no voice, or choosing compassion over fear. One bowl of soup had changed everything, and in a universe filled with wonders beyond imagination, that remained the most amazing fact of all. The story had come full circle, but like all the best stories, it was really just the beginning of something even greater. As Sarah and prepared for their next diplomatic mission to a newly discovered civilization, they carried with them the knowledge that kindness was truly the most universal language of all. And somewhere in the depths of space, other dragons who had thought themselves forgotten began to hope that they too might someday taste freedom, served with a side of human compassion.